Welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking about the Snowball Analytics Portfolio Tracker and if it's worth it for you to use and actually pay for. Now, if you've been following my channel, you know that I recently switched over to Snowball and I'm using it to monitor my own portfolio and showing it in my monthly portfolio recaps. So in today's video, we're going to break down the different tiers and the features so that you know if the platform and the price make sense for your situation. And here's what you can expect to see. We'll do a walkthrough of the full platform, and then I'll break down what features are available for free, what I think the best paid features are, and what things I wish were better with the platform, who the tool is best for, as well as who probably doesn't need it or at least doesn't need a paid tier. And then lastly, what does it all actually cost and how to get it. Now, as always, full transparency, I am a Snowball Analytics affiliate now, but I only share links to platforms that I actually use and that you see in my videos, so you know it's not just me pumping an affiliate link. But if you've been here for a while, you know that I'll go through the good and the bad of the platform so that you can make the best decision for you and your situation, not just what was good for me. All right, so let's get started with the review. Now, just some basics. The Snowball Analytics platform obviously has a website which you go to in a browser, which is where I probably spend most of my time. But they also have apps for iOS and Android, which has a lot of the basic functionality, but not all of it. So the app isn't really a replacement for the website. You'll still have to use a browser to get to all the features. But I will say in general, the look and feel of the site and the app is very well done. It looks clean and professional and like it was designed in this century, unlike some finance apps out there. But let's go ahead and walk through the website since it has all the features in it. All right, so if we take a look at the main dashboard here, you can see just some basic information. Here's my composite portfolio called Matt Stocks, and we're going to look at what all that has in it, but you can see my brokerage, my business 401k, my HSA, my Roth, and my traditional IRA are all within this one composite portfolio, so I can see it all together. It has your total value, your total profit, your internal rate of return, and then obviously your dividend income. Now it has some basic stats and charts where you see the different industries that your stocks are in, your top day gainers and top day losers, as well as recent and upcoming events. And I really love this calendar because it just helps me get a quick visual to say, okay, what earnings are coming up, what dividend payouts are coming up, what ex-dividend dates are coming up. And it's just nice to have that just right there on the front dashboard. Now, one thing I did want to show is this concept of a goal, which I haven't actually set up here, but it's really nice because if you have a specific goal, you can actually put it in here and it'll track it for you. So this is the composite portfolio. So let's just say my goal is to have this be $1 million portfolio. And let's say I want to achieve it in 5 years, and my contributions will be $1,000 a month. I'm just kind of making this up. And just to show you what it does, let's do save and calculate. And so basically what it's saying is that in order to achieve my goal in 5 years with a contribution amount of $1,000 a month, I would need an average return of 23.64% a year, which is obviously very optimistic. But it's just cool because you can see this, and then when you go back to the dashboard, you can actually see your goal down there. And so as your portfolio grows, it updates this to see how close you are or how on track you are to hitting your goal. All right, but let's go to the analytics tab because here's where I spend a lot of my time. Again, basic stuff up here. It shows your cash position, and then you have your actual holdings listed here with a bunch of different information. Now there's the return tab here, which shows you the actual return that you've had. There's a dividend tab, which has the dividend score, dividend growth, and a bunch of other kind of criteria here that you can choose. They have the filters up here that allow you to customize it however you want, which is really nice. Then if you scroll down, you can see that it breaks down your portfolios based on the actual account that it's in. And then a screen that you guys see in my portfolio updates, the actual all holdings screen where you get a little graph and your actual weights in your portfolio. And one thing that I don't really show a lot on mine is you can break this down if you want it by sector or by actual class. So in my case, it's mostly just stocks and cash. But if you had real estate, if you had crypto, then all that would show up here as well. If you have stuff in different currencies, then again, it'll show it there. Mine's only USD, regions, countries, etc. So there's a lot of ways to kind of break it down based on what you're actually invested in. Now, as you can see under analytics, there's actually multiple tabs here. So if we go under dividends, and what you see, there's a lot of dividend information related to yield and payout by each stock that you hold, your overall yield and yield on cost, and just a bunch of great dividend graphs and other things to really track your dividend income. Now, if we go to growth, this should look pretty familiar to you because this is exactly what I show in my portfolio updates, where you can see how your portfolio has performed against the benchmark. When you look at portfolio performance, you can actually change the benchmark to whatever you want it to be. So if you wanted to choose the NASDAQ, you could, and actually have multiple benchmarks on there. Or like in my case, I just keep the S&P 500. Then when you look at your portfolio performance, you can compare it against the benchmark to see how you're doing. And again, this is what I show in all my videos. Being able to look at it on a monthly level is really nice as well. And you can go back in time to actually see it month by month for the full history of your portfolio. Because let's say that you're actually building a dividend portfolio and you're like, look, S&P 500 is fine, but that doesn't really make sense for me. I want my benchmark to be SEHD because I want to compare my performance against a dividend ETF. Well, you can absolutely do that. Now, all these graphs also have additional details. If you just want to see the line items by month over time, then you can see that as well, including exporting it to CSV. If we scroll down, you can see holdings performance. And the nice part about this is the flexibility because you can show even the ones that you've sold to put them in the graph. Now, the reason why it didn't actually change is because I'm looking at capital gains. Now, obviously, if I've sold them, then I don't have any more capital gains because they're gone. But if I change this to total, then all of a sudden, every stock that I've ever held shows up on this list with my total gain that I've had, both profit and loss that was realized, and existing capital gains. And then once again, I can view details to just get a more detailed look at each of the items. Now, if I go over here to metrics, what it'll show me is some basic portfolio stats like price to earnings, volatility to beta, Sortino's ratio, and Sharpe ratio, which you can compare both against the S&P 500 and against whatever kind of your metric or guideline is that you're trying to hit here. Now, me personally, I don't really use these all that much, but it is nice to actually be able to see it versus the market. Okay, so if we go to portfolio, what we can see here is there's holdings, which basically shows all your holdings, kind of like on the other page, as well as transactions. Now, in my case, I updated all my transactions manually because I had it come from different brokerages at different points in time. And to be able to do that is pretty straightforward. Now, if you want to add transactions manually, then clearly you can do it like this, where you can add dividends or even cash or expenses if you have fees, as well as your buys and sells. But ideally, we don't want to enter our transactions one by one, especially when you're first setting up. And they come with multiple options to kind of connect your transactions, either through connecting your brokerage, which is actually a link through your brokerage account to where it updates automatically, or you can upload a brokerage statement, which is what I did to set mine up. And so in my case, I chose Charles Schwab because that's what I used. And they show basically the steps to be able to export it from Schwab and import it into Snowball, which is really nice. And if you don't use Schwab, they have a bunch of other brokers as well that they support, including the popular ones like Fidelity and Robinhood. But if you don't have as complicated of a situation like I did, then the best option is probably to connect your brokerage so that you can just link it and have it automatically update. So in my case, I use Schwab, but they have over 200 supported brokerages here, which makes automating your transactions pretty easy. Now, if we take a look at the dividend calendar, this is what you see in my videos each month as well. And it's a really nice view of dividends that you've actually received, as well as ones that are estimated over time. Now, you have multiple options here to show 1 year ahead, which is what I normally look at, as well as 2024 from a calendar year perspective, and previous years as well, if you want to see it like that. Now, one of the things that I like the most, other than just some basic information here that's right front and center, is this calendar that shows all the dividends that you should expect in each month. It's just a nice, clear view to be able to quickly look and say, okay, here's what I should expect. Here's the ones that I've already received. And you can see that it updates anytime that you look at it. So if we go to June here, you can say that Visa was received on June 3rd and all the way down the line so that you know when the dividends are estimated, when they're declared, and then when you actually receive them. Now, in terms of tools, what you see is they have portfolio rebalancing, top dividend stocks, dividend payout calendar, portfolio lab, and find the dip. And I'm going to kind of go in the opposite direction here. Let's go to find the dip first. And this may look familiar to you if you watch like Joseph Carlson. I know he has a dip finder on his tool. But the idea here is it looks at portfolio holdings whose value has fallen recently and just kind of displays it to you. So in this case, Meta's down almost 4% lately over the past 10 days. But it's a nice quick tool to say, okay, which of my stocks are down right now that maybe I should add to? Now, if we go to Portfolio Lab, here's where you can do some really interesting things to backtest your strategy, which I think is really cool. So if I just say copy from my portfolio, let's just say Matt stocks and current allocations, then basically it recreates my portfolio. If I click next and I say, I want to backtest this against historical data. And I'll just say, okay, if I had this portfolio with $100,000 and I started on January 2019, I never rebalanced and I reinvested dividends, then what would my account have looked like? And then what you get is a nice report of what would have happened had you had this portfolio back then. Now, obviously, my portfolio would have crushed because I had stocks like Apple and Nvidia that really were up a ton over the past 5 years or so. Now, obviously, hindsight is 2020 and it's easy to say, oh, I would have totally picked these stocks and done so well, but it's still a nice tool to say, okay, if you have a new strategy, just take a look at what it would be like if you backtested it against previous conditions in the market and see how it would have performed. So it's a fun tool to be able to use, especially as you're experimenting with building your own strategy. And along that line, they also have a top dividend stocks list, and this allows you to kind of filter through whatever criteria is interesting to you. So you can say, you know what, for me, I want to check on dividend growth. I don't really care about free cash flow, and I don't really care about revenue, but I do care about their dividend streak and their frequency. And then you can just kind of take a look at which ones meet the criteria you want. So let's say, you know what, I want to know dividend growth as my primary consideration. And Cigna is one that is top of the list there. So it's just a nice little tool to research dividend stocks based on what your criteria is if you're building that kind of portfolio. If we just take a look at what they show for each individual stock, it's actually pretty nice how much information they have on here based on the type of tool that it is, because it's not necessarily a research tool per se, but when you look at the financials on Snowball, it's actually a pretty nice experience because you can adjust this graph to include things cost of goods sold, operating income, and you can just kind of do this research that maybe isn't as detailed as some of the other tools like FinChat, but it's pretty good for an analytics tool that you're using to manage your portfolio because it even allows you to add other companies to where you can view them at the same time. So that way you can actually compare Visa and MasterCard to see how they match up from a fundamentals perspective. And this is true of basically all the data that they have. If you want to look at things on the balance sheet, cash and cash equivalents, short-term investments, you can basically click on anything and they'll add it to the graph. Now, Snowball is mainly an analytics tool to manage your portfolio, so it's not really meant to do the heavy research that maybe some other tools are, but I really think that having these stats and the ability to kind of click to add them to the graph real easy is a really nice touch that makes it a little bit more valuable for folks who are like, you know what, I want to manage my portfolio in this, and I want a little bit of information to do some research, then it actually is a nice combination. All right, so a lot of pretty cool stuff. So let's take a look at what's actually free and what's paid for. And one of the really cool parts about Snowball is that they offer a pretty generous free tier as long as your portfolio needs are pretty simple. And even if it's not, the free tier at least allows you to get a feel for what the service is like without having to commit to paying up front. And for that matter, they offer a 14-day free trial for any of the tiers, so you can try out a specific one that you're interested in risk-free, and then change back to a free tier if it's not what you're looking for. So if you're someone with less than 10 overall holdings and don't mind having everything in one portfolio and don't need to actually connect your brokerage, and don't want to track any custom assets like any gold or real estate or crypto that you might have, then the free tier actually comes with a lot of stuff. And I know it sounded like I just rattled off a bunch of limitations, but if you're only investing in a few index funds, it probably works pretty great. But all right, enough of the free stuff. What are you actually getting if you pay, and is it worth it? And the main thing you get off the bat is the ability to have larger and more complex portfolios and still be able to use all the same tools. And let me show you what I mean. On the free tier, you get one portfolio, up to 10 holdings that are stocks, ETFs, or funds, one custom holding, and one watch list. Plus, you have to manually add your transactions or holdings because you can't connect your brokerage. But then next up on the starter tier, it gets you still only one portfolio, but now you have unlimited holdings of stocks, ETFs, or funds, up to 5 custom holdings, and the ability now to connect your brokerage to sync automatically. And then if you go up to the investor tier, and this happens to be the one that I'm actually using, on that tier you get up to 10 portfolios, unlimited holdings, unlimited custom holdings, and again, the ability to connect your brokerage and sync automatically. So for someone like me who's tracking my performance across 5 different account types, in order to see things at the account level, but then also at the group level, I needed to be on the investor tier. And that's because each portfolio is basically an account that has its own holdings. But the nice part about it is that you can have composite portfolios, which allow you to pick and choose which accounts to group together. So you can see the performance and stats across multiple accounts. It seems like something really basic, but for me, it was a huge feature. And that's because the best part of their platform, in my opinion, is a combination of portfolio tracking and benchmarking tools, along with the analytics features around dividends, believe it or not. Now, my portfolio strategy is tailored around being able to beat the market. So obviously, being able to see my performance versus the market is a huge thing for me. Why I like the dividend features as well is because at some point, my focus is going to shift from total return and beating the market to establishing my dividend income as I get closer to retirement. So if you're an income-focused investor, then those features are going to be super valuable to you even right now. And that flexibility within the tool to be able to meet different investor strategies was one of the things that I thought was really cool. And that actually leads me into the next feature, which is one that I hadn't even really started using yet, and that's custom holdings. Now with the free tier, you get 1, but then it goes up to 5 and then unlimited on the investor tier. And a custom holding is where you can add things that aren't stocks, ETFs, or mutual funds. So any real estate that you might own, or savings accounts, or gold or precious metals, or even Bitcoin and crypto. All right, so enough of the stuff that I like. Let's talk about a few things that I wish were a little bit better. Now, first off, the prices on the site aren't actually real-time prices. There's an up to 30-minute delay. And so for some people, this is going to be a deal breaker because they expect a paid-for portfolio tracker to have real-time data. Now, for me, it's not a huge deal because I don't necessarily expect my portfolio tracker and analysis tool to have real-time data. Now, I would expect that out of my brokerage account, obviously, because that's where I'm actually going to buy and sell. So for me, it's not a huge deal, but I do understand why some people think that it really is a deal breaker because having real-time data would be nice. Next, now I talked about this in one of my previous videos, but the color scheme on some of these graphs, in my opinion, could be better. I mean, mainly, it's just not very functional to have multiple holdings be the same color and everything really the same color scheme. Ideally, they'd be different, and the scheme overall could use some variety, or at the very least, the ability to change it if you wanted to. But this is really more of an annoyance than a huge deal. It's just something that I noticed and I thought I'd call out. Next up, the news articles that they have for stocks and ETFs can actually be helpful, and I think it's cool how they're trying to include the sentiment and using AI to do so. Now, it's not perfect, but I like the idea. But the issue I found is that the algorithm for finding articles is struggling a little bit when you have a ticker symbol that matches up with a normal word. For example, Cloudflare's ticker symbol is net, so it picks up a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with it just because the article has the word net in it, or even Visa because it's simply just a V. Now, obviously on ones where the ticker symbol is unique, like let's say Microsoft, it works really well. So overall for those stocks where there's some ambiguity in the ticker symbol, the news aggregation isn't very valuable because it's mostly noise. So this is a feature where I really like the idea. I like the direction of where they're going. I think it really has some promise in the future, but it's just not quite there yet when you have these kind of weird situations where the ticker symbol is close to a real word. Next, the provided financials for each stock are actually pretty good, and I think they did a good job of providing a mix of things that you don't normally see, but not overwhelming you. But there are some differences. For example, like net debt here is total debt minus cash only, not cash and short-term investments, where on other sites like Seeking Alpha, it's calculated differently. But this is kind of like the same issue we saw with the stock price, where it's different based on different data providers. And so in this case, when I asked them about it, they basically said, look, this is the data that we get from our provider, and it matches the data that you see on other sites as well that happen to use the same data provider. So is it a huge deal? No, probably not. I think for me, it was just more of, hey, I'm not used to seeing it this way. So it's just something to look out for, depending on what you're used to when you calculate things like net debt. So speaking of data and full transparency, I figured I would share this comment that I got on one of my previous videos. He said, Snowball sucks. Missing data, inconsistent data, and incorrect data. UK stocks mixed with US and global stocks. Support was good until they started saying I should check every transaction by hand. They can't even get right the amount that's been invested, nor importing data from broker or connecting for automatic updates works properly. And so at this point, I kind of asked clarifying questions like, can you explain to me, what you mean by missing data? I hadn't experienced that. And here's what they said. It's missing correct data about dividends, fees, what's the actual and real amount I've invested versus what's Snowball showing, and it skews completely every statistic such as rate of return, dividend yield, etc. It's a shame. I like the overall looks. I've been trying out for the past year, giving feedback to the creators, and they did change the data provider, but it seems nothing's changed really. Most problems are with ETFs and stocks that are from LSC, missing and incorrect data about yield, dividends, etc. So what I'll say about this is I can't speak to this person's experience, but I can speak to my own. And when I first started with Snowball, I was importing all my transactions, and I imported them manually because I use multiple brokerages across the timeline of my portfolio, and so I couldn't just connect it. And I probably had 4 or 5 different email conversations with Snowball support where I thought that they were calculating something wrong, and it turned out that I actually did something wrong. It turned out that I missed something. I didn't add a data point, or I didn't add a data feed. I'm not saying that that's what this person's issue is. They could have a legit problem that they're dealing with or whatever. And again, all my stuff is US stocks. So I don't know about LSE and, if there's issues there with the data there. But I haven't run across specific data issues other than the differences of data provider that we've talked about before. But I will say, I thought it was calculating everything wrong until I actually talked to them, worked through it, loaded my data and validated it, and then realized, oh, the way that I was doing it before was actually wrong, and this is right. And then the last thing, some folks have said they're having syncing issues, but again, this is not something that I personally experienced. It's just something I saw a couple of people talking about on Reddit. Now, obviously, I'm trying to be as fair as possible to share these other experiences that other people have had that I haven't actually experienced. But for me, even though these are things that I would like to see improve or that I think could be better, overall, they're pretty minor when it compares to the actual value that I'm getting from the platform. I mean, for me right now, it's a no-brainer in terms of being able to see my portfolio in the way I want to see it, and the performance benchmarking and other analytics tools are just excellent. Plus, for every negative comment or issue, there's also positive comments where people are getting value from the platform, like this one that says, honestly, I love Snowball Analytics. I use it to track the growth of my dividends as they come in and as they increase. So like always, you need to try it out for yourself and see how it fits for you. All right, so let's wrap this up. Now, who is Snowball Analytics best for? Just about any investor who wants to measure their performance or benchmark their portfolio based on a money-weighted return that takes into account their cash flows. Anybody who has an investing strategy and wants a tool to help them monitor their progress, and also anyone who doesn't want to be tied to any one broker forever. And lastly, investors who want the flexibility to have their tool evolve with them over time as they go from growth to dividends and income. And for me, it's really been great. And that's why I switched over and I'm finally able to measure it the way that I want to. And that's why you'll be seeing it in all my monthly portfolio recaps. But let's be fair, who probably doesn't need it? Honestly, if your broker's native performance management tool is okay for what you're doing, then maybe there's no need to create another account somewhere else. Either because you like having it all in your brokerage app, or your situation is really simple enough to where you're like, I don't want to complicate it and have a whole nother account. That makes perfect sense. Also, if you're looking for real-time price data to monitor your portfolio every minute of the day, again, probably your broker is going to be the best bet there. Okay, so lastly, what does it actually cost and how do I get it? Now, Snowball has 4 different tiers, and obviously we talked about the free tier already, and then they have the starter tier for $7.99 a month, the investor tier, which is the one that I'm on, for $14.99 a month, and then the expert tier, which basically adds unlimited portfolios for $24.99 a month. Plus, if you are interested and you decide to use my affiliate link, you'll get 10% off whatever plan you choose. But even better, Snowball is currently doing a Black Friday sale where you get 30% off of any plan. Their sale runs from today, November 25th to December 4th. So it's definitely a great time to try them out and see if it's a fit for you and get a chance to sign up at a nice discount. So I'll put my affiliate link down in the description in the comments if you're interested, but at a minimum, I would recommend you go out there and try one of the free accounts or one of the 14-day free trials, because if you have any interest at all, it allows you to actually use a tool and see if it makes sense for you risk-free. So hopefully this review helped, and if you guys have any questions, let me know down in the comments and I'll answer them as best I can. Hope you guys have a great day out there. Financial independence is true freedom, so keep building and stacking wins, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.